Your host, John Sarianides. And as always, I'm joined by my partner, John Lyons. Jake Hamilton is scheduled to join us. He is on assignment, so hopefully he joins us here in the next few minutes. John, how are you on this evening? 2 nights before the first round of the NFL draft. It's finally draft week. It's finally here, for the love of God.
Yeah, I feel like I've been saying, John, for the past month, every time we do one of these shows, like, oh, it's almost here, it's almost here, and now it's finally actually here, draft week. And I'm excited for this episode. We've been doing Patriots Pulse for a couple of years now in the offseason. Of course, we do the post-game shows during the season, but this is a little bit of a unique setup, us doing a mock draft together, something we did not do together last year, but I'm looking forward to it tonight because I think we're going to maybe make some interesting things happen.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And I know, as I mentioned earlier, Jake is going to be joining us here, but we're going to jump right into it. 7 rounds. We're going to do this mock draft together. Jake, as soon as he jumps on, he can join the fray as well. And you know what? We want your interaction. So if, as we're making these picks here, if you know what, you want to chime in and tell us, hey, maybe you should consider going here in this round, that's fine. I mean, again, this is the first year we're doing this. The draft itself isn't an exact science. This is going to be an exact science. So, John, I think we're going to start by picking third here, as we already know. And I think the two of us are in agreement here. We're thinking receiver.
Yeah, it's going to be Roma Dunze. Yeah, that's where we're going at third overall. You know what, John? I say we could make this like the Patriots, and it's a collaborative process with my Uncle John Kraft in the corner telling me what to do, or we could alternate picks here. I think – at 3 overall, is there any disagreement between you and I on Drake May?
No, none at all. I think if they stick and pick, he's got to be the guy, assuming he's there. But at this point, I think where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that the Commanders are going to take Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, so we have Drake May at 3 overall, and the Drake May pick. Look, first of all, I think if May's gone, I would take Daniels there too. So I think either way, you can sit at 3. You can get that quarterback of the future. I really like May there, though. And the thing about May, and I wrote about him for New England Football Journal, my own mock draft today, he's got the size, and he's also, I think, a really good passer in the short to intermediate area. And not that Daniels isn't. I think Daniels is a better deep ball thrower. But when you look at the Patriots offense under Van Pelt and what they're going to try to do with, some good pieces on offensive line, like on Onwenu and Andrews. I know City So was better towards the end of last year, but uncertainty on the left side of the O-line. They're probably going to try to get the ball out quickly, right? So May is a guy that I think they can trust in the short area, that they can, use in play action. And he's also a guy that I think he's more similar of a quarterback to Jacoby Brissett than Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are. And I just think if that's someone that he's going to be learning behind, whether it's for half a year, a full year, he can kind of see some similar traits. Obviously, he's a better athlete than Brissett. I think he's going to be a better player, but I think their styles are a little bit closer than maybe what you would see in a Daniels or Caleb Williams if he somehow surprisingly falls. So I think that would be a nice fit for the Patriots as well.
Yeah, we've been listening to the talk the last couple of days. Of course, Diana Rossini's report yesterday that the Patriots are entertaining trading down. Look, the bottom line is this. We've said it for months now, going on 6 months plus. It's a quarterback-driven league, and if you don't have a top 10 signal caller, you're not a Super Bowl contender. We should know that better than anyone. We witnessed greatness for 20 years with Tom Brady. We know what a great quarterback looks like. We know what a franchise quarterback looks like. And we know what a franchise quarterback means to a team. And the bottom line is we don't know when they're going to be picking this high again. You hope it's not next year or anytime soon. You have the opportunity. This is a pretty polarizing class. I compare it a lot to the 2004 class of Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, J.P. Losman. I compare it to that class in terms of the type of potential talent that's in it, but also in terms of how polarizing it is to me. But the bottom line is, if you stick at 3, May falls to you, you take them. Look, you're not contending for a Super Bowl next year. Next year's a bridge year. If you don't want to call it a rebuilding year, you don't want to call it a punt year, call it whatever you want. The bottom line is you're not winning jack squat next year. Next year is more about getting to 2025 and beyond. You draft Drake May if you have to sit him for a half a season, maybe even a full season. You do it, but the bottom line is you're talking 6'4", 230, tantalizing skill set, good athlete, can play in and outside the pocket, can make off platform throws. He's tough. Yes, he's inconsistent. Yes, he's got to work on pocket mechanics in terms of his footwork. Yes, there are some anticipation issues there. But if you let him sit for a half a season, a full season, you work on those things, you'll fix them. Those are all fixable things. The bottom line is you need a franchise quarterback. It wasn't Mac Jones. You whiffed there. You try again. Stick and pick. Drake May's the pick for us. And we're on to pick 34.
Yeah, and just one last thing on that. I have heard some chatter about, and I know we've talked about this a little bit. Oh, should you draft a guy there because your offense and your roster isn't ready for a young QB? If that guy's going to be a franchise quarterback, you take him no matter what. And if you got to sit him and wait for that offense to be good enough around him for him to develop, fine. But if you just don't take him because you don't think your offense is good enough, first of all, I don't think they believe that. We saw Elliott Wolf say we have NFL receivers, but also to me, that's just being scared. Like,
I thought he was pumping their tires a little bit, but I also took him at face value, John. I actually thought that he was being honest. I think in their minds, they think what they have would allow them to be competitive. Now, that's debatable, but the bottom line is in that building, they think they have enough to compete from a skill standpoint.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think they feel that way. I don't necessarily think they have enough, but I think they feel that way. And I think, again, if you take the quarterback there and he sits for a year, and then next year you have a really good young quarterback, like it's a no-brainer. So the only reason they don't go quarterback here, John, if they don't like any of the guys left. Other than that,
right. And I'll say this too: when they took Drew Bledsoe in 1993, look, they didn't have a ready-made skill group back then either. He had to grow with that skill group.
Yeah.
They built those pieces around them so that by the time they got to that Super Bowl in '96, they had Terry Glenn, they had Curtis Martin, they had already had Ben Coates. They had Vincent Brisby. They accumulated talent around him. So, yeah, there's going to be a couple of pieces here that are going to play with Drake May potentially, assuming he's the pick in a couple of years. But the bottom line is this is an incomplete skill group. You're going to be building this skill group around him over the course of the next couple of years.
For sure. And as we go to pick 34, John, this is a spot where in my own mock draft, and I'm curious your thoughts, I think this is a prime spot for them to trade back if they want to accumulate some assets, still get a top 40, top 45 player. I wouldn't be shocked if they end up using this pick to trade back and get some more capital come Friday night.
I wouldn't be surprised either. If I were running their draft, my approach would be I'd be looking to do one of two things. Either trade back into the first round and secure one of the top remaining offensive tackles, or stay there at 34 and take the best offensive tackle on the board. I know that this is a value pick. I know there are going to be a lot of teams calling them on Friday morning looking to acquire it. But in my view, I just think that left tackle hole is a gaping hole, and you can address it at 34. If you trade down, now you're running the risk of getting out of that top 10 at the tackle position. And I think once you get outside the top 10 guys at that spot, let's say you get past like Roger Rosengarten, I think it gets really iffy. I think you want to stay in a ballpark where you can end up with Kingsley or you know, with a Jordan Morgan or possibly a Patrick Paul, a Roger Rosengarten. You want to stay in that neighborhood. I think if you get away from those guys and if you trade back far enough, I think you will. Now I think it gets risky, and now you're going to have to try to make it work with Okorafor next year because you might not have another option.
And with that in mind, I mean, right here on the board, we do have some trade offers, pick 37, pick 43. You have any interest in trading back, or are we sticking and picking in round 2?
You know what? I like that Charger offer. It's only 3 spots. You pick up the extra picks here. I say we accept that offer, trade down 3 spots. You're not too far away. I still think you're in that neighborhood. If we want to take one of those offensive tackles, we can. If not, if for whatever reason there's a quick run on them there before we get to 37, I think wide receiver is going to have some talent there that we can address the receiver position if need be.
And just for the record, the Chargers traded up and they took Everett's own Mike Sanistro out of Michigan in this draft. So we're now at pick 37.
His own guys.
We traded down. We got a couple extra picks there, which I agree, John. It's only a few spots. So now we look at the board, and there's some really, like Troy Franklin's there. Ladd McConkey. Now, look, I know everybody loves Ladd McConkey, and I like him too. I just don't see him as an X. And when I have Franklin and I have Keon Coleman on the board there, guys that could be real X receivers, like I like those guys over McConkey for the Patriots and especially their fit. And then, of course, we have some pretty intriguing options at tackle here, and we're getting near. You mentioned Rose Garden's name, right? We see his name there, getting a little iffy. What are you thinking here, receiver or tackle?
I'm all in on offensive tackle. I love Kingsley Suamatua. I think you take him. He steps in, and I think if he has a good camp, he starts for you from day one at left tackle. Elite skill set. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Terrific prospect. He's got length. He's got athleticism, good feet. He's a guy that can play on the backside. Look, you want to protect your potential franchise quarterback. Marry him up with a left tackle that's going to be here for him for a bulk of his career. I think Kingsley can be that guy. I think he should be the pick.
Yeah, and I think my view on pick 34, and I know we traded here, and I'm fine with a trade, is whether you pick a 34 or you trade down a few spots, you should look at the board. And when I'm saying you, the Patriots should look at the board, and whoever their best left tackle prospect is, whoever their best X receiver prospect is, whichever guy they think is going to be the better player, pick that guy. Whether it's the tackle or the receiver, but address one of those positions. And I think, John, this is unfortunately where them not getting a left tackle in free agency and that Jonah Williams name just keeps sticking out to me.
Yeah.
This is where it hurts him, because I think, if they had signed Jonah Williams, again, Arizona, 2 years, $20 million, and the guy I know was not a great right tackle last year. He was a good left tackle the previous 2 years. If you have Jonah Williams there at left tackle or someone at left tackle you feel good about, then we probably would have just picked a receiver there, and our offense would be better. So I think that's where it does hurt them. But now you have Onwenu with Kingsley there. Maybe you have 2 good tackles for 5, 6, 7 years down the line. So I think, again, you still walk away feeling good about that pick, but I think you also think, man, this is where free agency hurt ourselves a little bit. And that brings us to pick 68, John, here. And this is interesting because if you look at the wide receiver position, you've got Jermaine Burton there. You've got Devontae Walker, Javon Baker, who I like, Johnny Wilson, who's, as tall as a 5-story building. You got him there out at X receiver if you want. Jalen McMillan's there. But then you also, outside of the receiver position, you have some just high-quality players on this board when we talk about guys like Andrew Phillips, Jalen Wright, Brandon Coleman, Junior Colson. The Patriots are an interesting spot here, and we are with this mock, because do you go with a guy like Burton, go with Baker, one of these receivers, or maybe a player who's a little bit better, but at a position they don't need as much?
Yeah, this is tough here because you could go full value here, and there's about 4 or 5 guys on that list right now that would be quality value picks at 68. But again, I think when you're coming off a 4-13 season with a deficit in talent at some key spots. Now, I will say this, and I talked about this today in my wide receiver preview. I don't think wide receiver is as pressing a need for them as a lot of people do, John. I definitely think you need that X receiver. They've identified that. They want that big-bodied receiver to replace Devontae Parker, someone who can play on the backside of trips, someone who can play on the backside, period, that can body up corners and man-to-man underneath in the 3-step game, that can win one-on-one on fade balls, back shoulder fades, or bang 8 or bang 9 routes. They want someone who can compete in contested catch situations. I don't know. My only concern is this. If you pass up on a receiver here, I'm not sure you're going to have many of those big-bodied guys left, because the one thing is a lot of those guys are already off the board. The Keon Colemans, the Xavier Legette's, those guys are gone. So the further along we get in this draft, I think you're going to find more Z and F and slot type receivers than you are true X receivers. So I think if you have an opportunity here, and Javon Baker's probably a little bit of a reach here, you might want to consider taking him.
And it's funny, that was the name I was thinking. I'm just pulling him up now, 6'1", 208. And if you look at what he does, he's going to be on the outside and he's going to go vertical for you, which, again, that's not the whole package. I get it, but it's what they just sorely lack in this offense. I mean, who in this offense, John, can you put outside and say, go vertical and win on the route? Nobody. I mean, really,
I don't really have that guy. And my concern with Devontae Walker is, and this is my issue with Xavier Worthy, I'm a little skeptical with those two guys, John, because I see a little too much Tyquan Thornton
Yeah, and
overload.
it's funny you say that, and this is probably a little unfair, but I feel that way with Troy Franklin a little bit, and part of it's just because he's so rail thin, and maybe it's again, maybe it's a little unfair, but like the Tyquan Thornton experience, and even coming out of Baylor, you would watch Tyquan Thornton, and you're like, man, he's getting widened to the sideline a lot for a guy that got picked in the second round, and part of it's because he's just so skinny, and he could not match up with guys physically, and that's just again, it's probably not fully fair, but there's a little bit of me that just shies away from a skinny guy, especially at X, right? Especially guy who's too skinny over there at X. And they got guys. I mean, Demario Douglas can get open in short areas and in space. Kendrick Bourne can make explosive plays with the ball in his hand, but they don't have that guy that, hey, run a 35-yard post, get open. You know, that's the guy that hopefully Baker can be for them. But we've so far, John, got 3 picks. We've gotten a potential quarterback of the future, a hopeful left tackle of the future, and a receiver that, well, not a finished product, a guy that you can at least line up in X and will win, not maybe every time for you, but will win enough for you.
Yeah,
So
as long as he's winning for
yeah.
you in plus territory in this day and age, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. And now I think this is where the draft gets interesting. And part of our trade down, we have pick 103 and pick 105. So we have several picks left to play with, including 2 in the span of 3 picks. And now that we've taken a shot at quarterback, taken a shot at receiver, and taken a shot at tackle, we can be a little bit more, I feel like, selective based on. Now, look, Patriots still have needs, obviously, beyond that. And we may want to come away with a second tackle, a second receiver, maybe even at the end of the draft, another quarterback. But I think we have a little bit of room to play here. So when I look at pick 103, there's 2 names right now jumping out at me. There's Cedric Van Pran, center out of Georgia, Pooney, the tackle out of Kansas, and Jared Wiley, the tight end out of TCU. Like, those are 3 guys right here. And the thing about Van Pran, I love David Andrews, but he may only play another year or 2. I think you want somebody at center behind him developing to be your center, if you will, of the future. And, Pooney, I think, is, a solid tackle, maybe a swing developmental piece to start. And Jared Wiley's a guy out of TCU they had on one of those top 30 visits. He's 6'7", 260. I think he would be a nice complement to Hunter Henry. I mean, what are your thoughts here at pick 103? You like one of those guys? You like someone else instead? What are you thinking at 103 here?
I love Jared Wiley. I think he is the one guy. Look, this tight end class isn't as good as last year's,
Sure,
but I still think this is a pretty good tight end class. I don't think you have a first round talent in this group, but I think you have a lot of guys that could go day 2 and early to middle of day 3. There's going to be a run on tight ends, I think, between the start of the 3rd round and the 5th round. I think you're going to see a bunch of them go in that area come come Friday night into Saturday morning. It's really hard for me, John, to pass on Jared Wiley here. The question we have to ask ourselves as the people running this draft is, should we address the defense? Should we think about edge? Should we think about corner? Cornerback is more of a need for this football team than people realize. I think people are so focused on Christian Gonzalez and him coming back from his shoulder injury last year that I think they're forgetting that Jack Jones ended up getting cut. J.C. Jackson ended up getting cut. You know what I mean?
Marcus Jones is coming back off an injury.
He's coming back off an injury. You're kind of thin there depth-wise.
And Jonathan Jones, John, he's probably one of, if not my favorite players on the team. I still like him better in the slot than I do outside.
I do too. And right now he'd have to play outside for you.
Yeah, and I think Alex Austin has a lot of potential to me, but that's another guy that, he had the interception against Buffalo late in the year. We only saw him in limited action, though. And I still think I agree with you. So I like here. Pick 103. I do like Jared Wiley. I think, again, 6'7", got a lot of measurables, but he moves well, I think, as a compliment to Hunter Henry. And even just early on, plus territory, the red zone, because I don't think he's going to blow anyone away blocking. That's going to have to be developed more. But plus territory in the red zone in the passing game, I think he can be an asset. And that brings us to pick 105. And it's funny because, I think defensively, we look at their defense as being one of the better defenses in the league. But you're right. They could use another guy at outside corner. I think they could use a developmental linebacker potentially later in this draft behind Tavai and Bentley. Tavai is in the last year of his contract. Bentley's only got 2 more years left. I would love a run-stuffing defensive tackle to pair with Christian Barmore as well, because I feel like their scheme is going to be pretty similar to what they ran last year with DeMarcus Covington at DC and Mayo at head coach. So I like addressing the defense here at pick 105. My question for you, I mean, we have Trotter Jr. sitting there at linebacker. We have Michael Hall, who I know, like, if you pull up Hall's measures, they're not jumping out at you. He's only 6'2", 280, but he is on the board from Ohio State. You have Kitchens, the safety, is there as well. And then you get into the corners. I mean, are you thinking corner here, or you like one of those other defensive guys?
Yeah, I like corner here. I like Jarian Jones. They've met with him. He's a guy that he had a great workout at the combine. He's an athletic freak. He kind of fits their relative athletic score model that they like to use. He is one of the poster boys for it in this draft. He is a freak athlete, and he's a guy that I think gives him some versatility in that he can play in the slot, which he played a lot of at Florida State. He can also play outside as a field corner. Now, I don't think he's your classic boundary corner. Your boundary corner has got to have length in this day and age in the game, and that's going to be Christian Gonzalez. But I like him here. I like him a lot. When you look at what's on the board right now at that position, Chris Abrams-Drain is another guy that they've met with in the pre-draft process. He's certainly a possibility later on, but it starts to get thin here. Chow Smith-Wade is another guy that they've met with that they like. I think he probably profiles more as a slot corner. Cam Hart, he had a really good week at the Senior Bowl, big physical corner, but I see him more as a guy that can roll down and be more of a press funnel flat type corner. I think if you're looking for a guy that offers scheme versatility and that he can play in the slot, he can play outside, I think Jarian Jones is that guy. Now, inside linebacker might be the weakest position in this entire draft. There's not a lot there. I think you bring up a valid point about Tavai going into the final year of his deal. Bentley has a couple of years left. Certainly a position you can address. The question I have for you is, do you wait to address it?
I think I do. And the reason I say I wait is you still have Tavai and Bentley for a year. Potentially you can bring back Tavai again on a shorter extension. And I think linebacker is a position that and I know it's a new head coach, but this defensive staff has developed really well over the years. So I would have faith in them developing a guy. And I also think, John, most of the season, they're going to have two linebackers on the field, and at times one, because they're going to go a ton of three safety. Like Mapu is a guy, I know he's a linebacker safety. I think they're going to play him probably exclusively at safety. You have Peppers at safety. You just re-signed Duggar, to an extension. They're going to run three safety packages a ton. I wouldn't be shocked if Mapu has any issues, if they give Marcus Jones an opportunity at free safety just because of his pure athleticism and his speed. So I think you're going to have a ton of three safety packages, a ton of three corner packages. They're going to be in dime package, I think, certain amounts of the time. And what's up, Jake Hamilton?
Hey.
So, yeah, I think, to me, I agree with you on Jarian Jones here at this spot. I just think linebacker is something, again, I want to address it, but I think you can wait a little bit to address it and get the better corner here.
Yeah, I agree. I just think, again, you have an opportunity to upgrade this secondary and add a guy that can step in and make an impact. And let's face it, they need guys that can step in and play right away, and we say that about them on offense. But I think defensively, cornerback it's more of a need than people think. Jake, we have made 4 picks so far. Just to fill you in, we're doing our mock draft. A little bit of a pivot from what we had originally planned. We took Drake May 3rd overall. Then we took Kingsley S. I call him because his last name is tough. We took Javon Baker. Yep. We took Javon Baker from Central Florida, the Alabama transfer. And then we took Jared Wiley, the tight end out of TCU. Some thoughts there before we make this pick. And did we make this pick, Lyons? Did you officially take Jerry?
Yes, I took Jarian Jones.
Okay, so
all right, I like
Jarian Jones is off the board. But just some thoughts on what we've done so far.
I mean, I like it. I think that the idea to stick and pick is probably what the Patriots should be doing at this point. I get there's so much talk about the trading back possibility, but I like the idea of them sticking and picking. I think Sua Mataia, I believe is how you say it, not to flex on you, John, but I think that he offers a lot of upside and some left tackle potential. I think that once you get to that second round, it's him, it's Jordan Morgan, it's Patrick Paul, but some of those guys could be off the board, or someone like a Patrick Paul at 34 could be a bit of a reach at that point. So I think sticking and picking there makes sense. Javon Baker, I like his game. I think that I don't know if he was still on the board. I've always been a big fan of Malachi Corley, but you do need the big X on the outside. I think Baker as a transfer also, it shows that he is able to go into a couple of different places and work it out. And obviously, if he was able to be recruited by Alabama, that is a big feather in his cap. And then I love Jordan. Was it Jared Wiley? Not Jordan.
Yeah.
Jared Wiley.
Jared Wiley. Yep.
I like Wiley too. I mean, if, Elliott Wolf is serious about weaponizing the offense, I think that's a great move. He's a great mover, 6'6", I believe. And
6'7".
I mean, he's a guy, 6'7".
Yeah.
Yeah. And he finds the soft spot in the zone from the tape that I've watched.
You watch his tape, and he's really impressive to me. His route tree is so advanced and so diverse, and you can do so much with him, especially in plus territory. And once you get into the red zone, I mean, he ended up becoming their best receiver last year. And that was a talented skill group for TCU. But I just think, for me, when you look at where they are at the tight end position right now, you've locked up Hunter Henry for 3 years, but you need that young guy who profiles as a Y. I agree with you, John. I think he leaves a little bit something to be desired as an inline blocker, but he could certainly get better in that area. But I think when you look at where they're at the tight end position, Hooper on a 1-year deal. They signed Wilcox yesterday. He's on a 1-year deal. They have LaMichael Petway. He's on a 1-year deal. I think you bring in a young tight end here, and I think you do it early. I love him. I love Theo Johnson out of Penn State. I don't think you can go wrong with him. There's going to be a run on tight ends, as I was saying earlier, Jake, between round 3 and 5. If getting Jared Wiley there at pick 103, that's a pretty good pick.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I was happy with it. And as we go, so far, I think we're, obviously, guys, we're doing a great job. I mean, come on. But, I do like the way
better than us. Nobody.
Yeah, I like the way the draft has fallen. And now at pick 137, I think we're in an interesting spot. Like, I like Maason Smith, defensive interior player out of LSU. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but I think he's got power there. You do have Kamara, an edge player there, which is another sneaky need for the Patriots. You got Maris Luifau, which, again, we just already talked about linebacker. And then you have that kind of second tier of offensive tackles with Caden Wallace.
I love Caden Wallace.
And you got
Penn State.
And even running back. Like, I see Will Shipley sitting there.
He's
I think
another guy that I'm a fan of.
Like, the thing about running back with this, I know they signed Antonio Gibson, but look, they overused Stevenson in 2022. He got hurt in 2023. I don't know if they're going to sign him to a second contract. And even if they do, I want another back there. I just don't want it to be the Stevenson and Gibson show, right? I'd like another back, a talented young back. I got maybe what they thought Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris could be, but I'd like a young, kind of talented back and fuse that. So I think, we have some interesting directions to go. And because of that earlier trade back from 34 to 37, we still have 5 picks left. So we have a little bit of wiggle room here. What do you guys, do you like another defensive player here? Do you like Caden Wallace? Do you like Shipley? Isaiah Williams is there too. What are some thoughts we have?
I love Caden Wallace, 6'4", 319. He's built like, and again, before people start hyperventilating here, he's built very similar to Cole Strange. I like his length. I think he's versatile. I think he can play guard. I think he can play right tackle for you. You need those guys in today's game where you're only carrying 7, sometimes 8 offensive linemen. You got to have that swing guy. He could be that guy. But, John, I think you bring up a great point at running back. And I've been kind of hammering this point home as well. We're so focused on quarterback and tackle and receiver. Running back is going to be a need for this team after this season because both Stevenson and Gibson are off the books. I think you need to have an in-house guy that at the very least can be somebody that you can turn the reins over to if you don't address it in free agency or next year's draft. So for me, I wouldn't have a problem going running back here. I know they like Ray Davis out of Kentucky, who was super productive, the Vanderbilt transfer. Of course, Will Shipley, his body of work speaks for itself. He's a poor man's Christian McCaffrey. You've also got Dylan Lobby. I believe he's probably still on the board.
I think he's still out there.
Yeah. Dylan Lobby from UNH. This could be a possible spot for him, probably at the start of where he could go. And then if you go defense here, I love Kamara out of Colorado State. They've met with him. They like him as well. I do think this might be a little high for him, though. You might be able to get him later on, but you can sell me on any one of these. But ultimately, collaboration's a key, folks. This is no longer the Bill Belichick show. We're collaborating now, so let's collaborate.
Yeah, Jake, what's your
Let's come to a
collaboration
consensus here,
here?
Hamilton? What do you want to do?
Geez, I think you go edge with
Well, I hate
Kamara.
collaboration, by the way.
Yeah, I think you go Kamara at edge. I think a lot of the guys the Patriots have taken in the past, and it's rare once you go towards those later rounds that you're really going to find that edge defender who has the size, the physical attributes, and the motor that you need to be a productive player off the edge. I think it's a pretty deep running back class. You mentioned Dylan Laube. He's probably still going to be there by 180, I'm sure. So I think if you address the defensive side, then you've kind of wiped your hands. You got your corner, got your edge. I mean, unless you want to add like an interior offensive lineman here, but it seems like based on what Elliot Wolf was saying earlier this week, he thinks that we're set with that.
Let me throw a name out here before we haven't made the pick yet, correct?
No, not yet.
Let me throw a name out here. Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian. Is he off the board?
He might be.
I will.
I think he probably
Yeah,
is.
he's gone.
He's gone. See, he would have been a guy.
Mhm.
This would have been a sweet spot for him. I think he's got a lot of upside, but he's off the board, so we don't need to talk about him. So we could go Kamara. John, here's the deal. I'm going to leave it up to you. You're the Matt Groh of this setup. I'm Elliot Wolf, and Hamilton is Cameron Williams.
Well, I'll go. No,
The
I go
resemblance
Kamara
is
there.
striking.
Steve Cargill.
But the thing about Kamara and I think the edge position as well is Anthony Jennings gets the extension. By the way, you want to watch something fun this year, Patriots fans? Watch Anthony Jennings set the edge in the run game. I mean, he's awesome at that. But beyond Jennings, I mean, Uche's on a 1-year deal. Judon's contract status is kind of up in the air. He's coming off an injury on the wrong side of 30 years old.
Yeah.
Like, this is a position that I think you're going to need. And look, and Keon White to me is a really interesting piece here because they used him a little bit inside last year. They used him a little bit outside. He was kind of a monster wherever they put him. I could see their long-term edge plans being Keon White on one edge and Anthony Jennings on the other, but I still want another guy with them, developing, talented, youthful guy, especially, I mean, God forbid injuries, but even just rotation-wise, I would like, 2 years from now for there to be another guy there in addition, because I think Uche's 1-year deal is great, but I don't expect him, like if he has another double-digit sack year, I think he will take. Yeah, and credit to him, for doing that. But I would say to add another young, talented guy there to develop, because again, Kamara doesn't have to play right away. He can develop for a year, and then when they have Keon White and Anthony Jennings there, if he's that third guy, it's a really valuable guy to have, especially in today's NFL on defense. So, Jake, I mean, I love the suggestion, Jake, and I agree. I think Kamara is the guy there.
Yeah, and just a quick thing on Keon White. It's going to be interesting what the coaching staff really thinks of him, because Bill Belichick could have had a really different opinion on, here's what I think he's going to do. Because he profiles, and I'm not saying he's the same guy, but he's like a supercharged kind of Richard Seymour player. Play him on the edge, you can kick him inside. He's got the size for both of those things, so he could be, right there if they're going 4-3 with Barmore right up front. And all right, then you got something really cooking with that defensive line. But if they think he's more of an outside guy, then they can still work there. But I think that edge is a sneaky need, and it's also what I would call a premium position. People pay a boatload of money for these guys. If you have a good guy on a rookie deal, you're probably going to be sitting pretty for a while against the cap.
Yeah, and I think taking Kamara there, you don't need to address edge the rest of the draft either. So you kind of get it out of the way. Mm-hmm. So with our earlier trade back, we have something, if Bill Belichick was here, he would love. Back-to-back picks, pick 180 and 181. And this is where, so now I could see like the running back, the linebacker type, or if we want to add another receiver. I mean, there's some like Josh Newton at corner. I know we already added a corner. If we hadn't, I think he would have been a good fit there. If we want to go guard, like JV and Cohen is there. Like there's a lot of, as I scroll here, names still on the board. Dylan Laube, we mentioned him already. He's there. We could use one of those picks on him. McKinley Jackson, who really talented player, didn't consistently flash at Texas A&M, but he's a guy on the defensive interior, 325 at 6'2". I mean, he can play 4-3. I think he's really good, but again, it's another defensive player. So, I mean, for these two back-to-back picks, what are you guys thinking here for these two?
I'd like to get a running back with one of them.
I'd agree.
I think going into this, we've all agreed that the theme here was going to be offense, offense, offense. I think we have to go offense the rest of this draft. In my opinion, as I mentioned, I think the inside linebacker group is weak. You're probably going to have to wait until next offseason to address that position. You could go running back here. You got Cody Schrader, who was super productive at Missouri, the former D2 transfer. Kamani Vidal at Troy, smallish back, just under 5'10", but a guy that can be a three-down back. And, of course, you got Dylan Lobby. I mean, you cannot argue with the production. I was fortunate enough to cover this guy for the last 2 years in person. He's the real deal. Watched him return a punt this year. I watched him score 3 different ways against Stonehill this year when I covered the game. Look, at this point in the draft, I think he's a nice value. And here's what I love about Dylan Lobby. He can play tail for you in this day and age where you're running outside zone, you're running mid zone. He's a one cut and go runner. He can stay square and get vertical. But the thing I like about him the most is the fact that you can line him up in the slot, use him in the jet game, the fly sweep game. But his receiving skills, in my opinion, he's the best receiving back in this draft. Better than Ray Davis and a couple of the other backs that put up some big numbers in better conferences and against better competition. But I'll say this. If you have any reservations about Dylan Lobby, do yourself a favor and go back and watch the Central Michigan game last year. He torched them. So to me, if you go running back here, I love Dylan Lobby as a value pick. I know that he's probably, according to their rankings, which, by the way, I think are too low, he's a better player than that. I'm okay with taking him here in round 6.
Yeah, I think that I think we would want to take him right here. I mean, just what you were mentioning, John, just the versatility with where you can line him up. I think just having a real pass catching back for a young quarterback like Drake May, as long as he doesn't sail the ball 15 yards out of bounds, he's going to be a good guy to have out in the flat, which would be nice. Bringing in a local guy also would probably get the fans excited. Probably a lot of jerseys, I'm sure, would be sold from him. But yeah, no, I think that he would be a great fit for them. Good receiving back. I mean, the Central Michigan game, he had like 250 yards receiving or something. So he also had a great Senior Bowl, which I know that those guys do at Patriots Place value. So yeah, I think he's a slam dunk. And the nice thing is there's not really any pick remorse because we have the next pick to pick.
Yeah.
And John, so me and Jake are lobbying for Dylan. It's on you now to.
Yeah, and Uncle Johnny Kraft is in the corner here telling me to pick him. The only other back here,
pick him. I think he's gonna be a good kid.
Yeah, like the only other pick that I like, I do like Rasheen Ali out of Marshall. I mean, I'm gonna go Lobby here. The only other guy I would consider here is Ali. But similar profiles, both physical guys. But I think what Lobby gives you on special teams, coupled with that receiving ability, I like that pick there. And now, of course, as Jake mentioned. I think we want to eliminate Torrey Taylor, punter. We're not going to pick him there out of Iowa at pick 181.
Well, I'm a little disappointed that we haven't taken a mid-round kicker. What the F are we doing?
Yeah, it's a new day in Foxborough.
My bad.
But so now we're at a point, like I agree with you, John. I think we're going to go largely offense the rest of this draft, but we don't need another running back. I mean, Tavion Johnson out of Kentucky, if you like, 5'11", 194. He's profiles more of a slot guy, which right now, if you're the Patriots, like you have Demario Douglas, who's a really good slot receiver. Kendrick Bourne's going to be like a Z, but also can be a slot guy. So I don't dislike Robinson there, but it's tough. You already kind of have a couple of those guys. JV and Cohen at guard, I think that's another good option for you there. And as we go down, Tip Riemann, we've already taken a tight end, but another option for you there as well. And then, of course, you get to Jace McClellan, another running back, and Dylan Johnson, who, if you watched Washington this year,
I know we said we were going to go offense, but if we were to go defense, I really like Gabe Hall out of Baylor. They have visited with him. He's been one of the guys they've talked to this offseason. He's one of those guys, and Jake brought it up earlier when he was talking about Keon White. He's one of those guys that can play inside for you in a 40 front as a 3-tech. He can be a 5-tech in a 30 front, and then depending on your sub packages and what you're doing with your fronts, he can play inside or outside and be an active part of it. If we were to consider defense and go with an interior defensive lineman, which you've been pushing for, John, he's a guy to consider. But I do want to go back to the receivers for a sec because
Sure,
another
I'll pull
guy
up the
that
receiver.
I know they like is Aeneas Smith out of Texas A&M. He was a 5-year starter in essence, and I know you mentioned Pop Douglas. You've got a slot type, but he is an explosive 3-level playmaker who I also think can help in the return game as a punt returner. Guy to consider there if he's available potentially if we're going to go receiver.
Hamilton, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I really like Joshua Cephas at a UTSA. I also like Bub Means out of Pitt. He is kind of
Bug Means has good size.
Yeah,
He could
and
be
I think
another
one of the
X.
Patriots' new coaches was one of his former coaches
Yeah.
at Pitt. He's got good size. He's
6'2",
played for a long
215.
time. His production wasn't great last year, but he's physical enough. He's good over the middle of the field and on the outside, and he was playing with a pretty bad Pitt team anyway. So I think he would be an option, but he also unfortunately is a little redundant to someone like a Javon Baker, who's probably going to be playing on the outside. So I like
But the
Josh
one thing I'll
Cephas.
say about Bub Means, though, to your point, Jake, is I think he's actually a nice alternative to a Javon Baker because, as you mentioned, I think he's going to be more of that intermediate, work the middle of the field. He can win in 50-50 ball situations in plus territory. But I do think that the Taekwon Underwood connection is going to matter here. The thing we have to consider, I'm going to throw a name out at you here, and I'm laughing because it seemed like the guy has been in camp with them for 30 years, but he could be another Nixon. That's
Oh, no. I was hoping you wouldn't say that.
The preseason All-Star, I know.
I'm just throwing that out there. But Bub Means is a guy that certainly, if you're looking for a guy that might not necessarily always have to be the X, he could be a big slot. He could be an F. He could be a Z. You can move him around. I'd be okay with that. Or you go offensive line here. They did draft 3 interior offensive linemen last year, but do you think that all 3 of those guys are good enough that they're going to make an impact? I have my doubts. I think City So is legit. I think he can develop into a quality starting right guard for you, but the book is still out on Mafia and Andrews.
Yeah, and I agree. And I actually like going interior offensive line. And I know they picked the 3 last year, but I mean, Jake Andrews, I'm not high on him right now. I think Antonio Mafia was really inconsistent. City So was good. And you think of those other 2, one of them can develop, but I'd still like another piece there. And so that's why right here, I'm looking at JV and Cohen. I'm looking at Layden Robinson. Dylan McMahon, too, is I still keep going back
He's
to.
more of a center.
Well, and I keep going back to that center thing. And actually, Jake, I mentioned it, I think, right before you joined. It's David Andrews over the age of 30. There was some questions whether he'd play this year. I kind of want someone there ready to take over at
But
center.
I think that can be Jake Andrews, though.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm just, from what I saw in the preseason last year in limited action, just down on Jake Andrews. You're not wrong, John. Maybe I'm just down on him.
What are
He's
your
got big
thoughts on
shoes to fill, too.
What are your thoughts on a swing tackle guard type? What do the tackles look like here? What's left on the board there?
So for tackles, pull them up. Yeah, so we have Ethan Driscoll's there, Nathan Thomas, Jalen Sundell, North Dakota
Frank
State.
Crum.
Yeah, Frank Crum is there.
Frank Crum's got some length to him. I don't know if he can play inside. I think at this stage of the game, think Michael Onwenu. Think a guy that can play. Again, think about what I was saying earlier as to why I liked Caden Wallace, a guy that is in that 6'4", 6'5" range that could kick inside. I'm going to give you a name, and I think people that are watching this are going to say, all right, knock it off, Sarianides. You're pushing your New England Football Journal agenda here. Enough with your propaganda bullshit. But C.J. Hansen.
So he's on the board.
He's on the board.
Yeah, so he's
that swing type.
My only issue with C.J. Hansen, I think, we're at pick 180. I think we can get him later. I'm not disagreeing. I think we can just have him.
Okay, fair point.
And that's why, I look at this
we have
board.
2 picks left, correct?
After this one, yeah, we still have 2 more.
So we have 3 picks left.
Yeah, 3 total, including this one.
So why don't we go wide receiver here, and then we can go offensive line, and I'm not opposed to going back to defense.
Yeah,
potentially if we need to. I mean, we could also go defense here. There's some quality edge guys there. I mentioned Gabe Hall. He's a possibility. You could always go defense here as well.
I'm thinking, Hamilton kind of has me convinced on Bub Means, and I know he's ranked later on there, but the versatility that you can, if you pull up his stuff here, you can put him, 6'2", 215, you can put him at X, but maybe you can put him as a big slot at times. I think that's something that, with already having Baker, I kind of like that versatility here, and just as a guy to develop too. So I like Bub. I think we should go with Bub Means here.
Bub Means it is.
All right, we're fast forwarding down. Pick 193, Torrey Taylor, punter of Iowa, still on. And as we sit here, so I like what you guys are saying about interior offensive line, and CJ Hansen's still there, Javian Cohen's still there, Drake Nugent off the championship winning Michigan Wolverines is still there. I think, unless you guys disagree, I think this is a great spot for an interior offensive lineman.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I also think, again, going back to tackle, finding that swing guy like you did in round 6 with Onwenu when you drafted him. I mean, again, they've had some success there. Herron a few years ago as well, another one of those swing guard tackle types out of Wake Forest. So the Patriots have traditionally in recent years drafted well up front along the offensive line. Some people would argue that point when they talk about Cole Strange. But that aside, I mean, again, either a swing tackle that could kick inside or a true interior lineman that can play both guard spots could fill a need here.
The one thing that I do think about, I mean, and obviously we're not going to have an undrafted rookie free agent signing period for a podcast, but I do think that we could. But it is interesting that especially interior offensive linemen have just been so devalued that a lot of those guys, because they're not going to make a huge impact, are probably going to be around later. So if you did really feel like there was a special teamer at a point like this that you were sold on and you said, we actually really like Will Reicheld, or was it Reichard?
Reichard, yeah, Will Reichard.
Reichard, yeah, and it's like we got to get rid of
Chad Riley.
Chad Riley.
Yeah, just clean out, everything. Yeah.
Then I think this could be an opportunity where someone like a Javion Cohen or an Ethan Driscoll will probably end up not even making it, or there's just a lower probability than some of those other skill position or special teams positions. So I don't know, something to consider there.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know if I want to draft another specialist, it'd be my third in 2 years.
And this is also hypothetical, as if we were.
And I think that I truly, genuinely believe, though, that they are going to stay away from drafting one.
Yeah,
they're very PR conscious. They know they've got their pulse on the fan base and the media. They know what's going on. They know that went over about as well as a fart in an elevator. They're not going to want to go back there. Here's a position, though, and John, you talked about this earlier. What about a safety?
I was about to say that.
Well, I was going to say Peppers is coming off the books after next year. You still have Mapu. You're still going to have Duggar, but you'd have to think they're going to make a pretty good push to keep Peppers. Peppers likes playing here. He really embraced the leadership role last year. Is there a safety on the board here that we like that we could potentially take a flyer on?
So we got Trey Taylor, Dominique Hampton, James Williams, Tyler Owens. I mean, you got some talent there. And I think what you're looking for at safety right now, to me, I would want a developmental free safety
guy that's going to play special teams, kind of like Joshua Bledsoe a few years back, who's still on the roster, but a guy like that. But this could be a spot where you go interior defensive line. I would love to take an interior defensive lineman here that could end up being a rotational piece and more down the road.
Yeah, and I do too. I think, but you kind of convinced me on I think safety is something that is a strength of the team, but I think that special teamer aspect, and also too,
it's got to be a guy that can play specials if he's going to make the roster at this point.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's why is there anyone on this list that really jumps out to you as A, be good on special teams, but B, you could develop them at safety as well?
I mean, Williams has got some quality ball skills. He's a guy that could play at all 3 levels. I don't know if I'd consider him a 3-by-3 safety, all 3 downs, all 3 levels, but he's certainly a guy that has developmental potential. And of course, Miami's history with developing that position.
Yeah,
they've done it well. Every year they usually have 1 or 2 guys that end up either getting drafted or signing as UDFAs. So he's a possibility. But I'm leaning towards interior defensive line because you did lose Lawrence Guy. You're still going to be young there. Barmore's coming into a contract year. It wouldn't be a bad idea to either have a guy that can be a first and second down guy, or, and I think this is something they've lacked, an Adam Butler type, an undersized guy that can play in sub packages and rush the passer.
And I think, Gabe Hall, that guy you mentioned, he's still there.
By the way, Logan Lee could be that guy.
I was going to say Logan Lee definitely profiles
So,
that, a little undersized, short arms. He might get pushed around a little bit in the run game, but I do think that he profiles as like an Adam Butler. And just a quick point on the safeties. I think it's Trey Taylor and Dominique Hampton. Those guys are both like real strong safeties that I think would just be sort of redundant to pick at this point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think so. Like, to me, I look at Logan Lee. I like McKinley Jackson, Gabe Hall. I think for me, I think it's between those three. Do you guys have a preference between those
I also
three?
like Jordan Jefferson. He was pretty productive at LSU. I'm surprised he's still there. And he's a guy that when you look at
317, yeah,
he is. And the thing is, you're talking about a guy that's like you mentioned, 6'4", 317. He has length. Again, we talk about they like guys up front defensively that can play multiple alignments. So this is a guy that can be a 3 technique and a 40 front. He's a guy that could be a wide 5 and a 30 front. He's a guy that you can play in A gap if you're getting into a 2-man front potentially in a sub-package situation. Not a great pass rusher, but certainly as a first and second down rotational guy, if you're looking for that, he could be that. I think Logan Lee, Gabe Hall, Myles Murphy might be better pass rush options.
Yeah, I think that Jefferson actually makes a lot of sense to the points you were just making, John. Again, you might just need a guy who goes out there and, just to give someone a breather, even if you don't think you're going to sack the quarterback on it. Just like, all right, just send a guy out there. He could, again, be sort of one of those guys that you see a little bit of in camp because they probably want to keep Barmore off the field. They want to keep Keon White off the field with their injury history. He could show you something in the preseason, a couple of those games that maybe gets you a little excited in kind of the way that we got a little bit excited about some of the other guys this last year.
And at this stage of the draft, in my opinion, and I'm the old dog in the yard here, been doing this for 24 years, competition matters. He played in the SEC. He put some good stuff on tape against good talent. So I think that does matter in this stage of the game.
All right. Jordan Jefferson it is. Defensive tackle. You guys convinced me. But it's a good point, too, especially the traits, the competition. I think that matters, especially at this stage in the draft. And now.
Oh, look who it is.
Will Reichert is sitting there at pick 231 if we want to actually take a kicker. I mean, another thing, and I'm not saying we have to do it, I think the Patriots are going to walk away from this draft with 2 quarterbacks, whether they take a second quarterback in the 6th or 7th round, or it's, an early undrafted free agent that they sign. And I just think of that, Carter Bradley's there. And if you look at the quarterbacks left, I mean, there's nobody really jumping. Like Tua's brother's there, Sam Hartman's there, but
but I'll tell you what, though, Keaton Slovis is a guy that I've heard they really like.
I like Slovis.
They had a good meeting with him.
This could be a Matt Castle thing, too. Like, you take the guy in the 7th round, so he's not an undrafted free agent, and you have him, and you can develop. And that's the thing, because, like, Bailey Zappi might not be here after this year, and Jacoby Brissett might not be here after this year. So you could have Drake May as your QB1, and then if you have a really cheap backup behind him that you're developing, I think you're in good shape. I mean, the Patriots, look, we know at times in the last 25 years they carried 4 quarterbacks, right? The famous story of Brady. They often carried only 2. Like, there were quite a few times they carried, it was Brady and Hoyer was an undrafted free agent himself behind Brady. And I know it's a little bit of a different situation now, but even with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, back-to-back years, they brought in young QBs. I think their vision was for that, a young starter and a young backup. So, I mean, if you guys like QB here, I'm not opposed to going Slovis there. I think, right now we can kind of pick 231, do whatever we want. But it's something, you could prevent him from being a UDFA, or if we want to go another position, we kind of got a lot of freedom here.
Yeah, I like Slovis with the pick here. I'd lean away from some of the guys who are ranked a little bit higher, like a Sam Hartman. I think he's just got too big of a personality to be behind someone like Drake May. Austin Reed, I'm not saying he's Bailey Zappi, but he comes from the same exact program.
That's
it's
system,
air
right.
raid.
They're going to put up big numbers, but it won't translate.
Yeah, they throw for 8 million yards a year, yeah.
I think that a Keaton Slovis would be sort of a safe pick, and I think also who's the other guy they have on the roster? It's not Trace McSorley anymore.
Nathan Rourke, the
Rourke,
old
yeah.
Yeah,
Ohio.
he's-
Even
Bond
isn't
baby.
Nathan Rourke's deal, correct me if I'm wrong, John, like that's a 1-year deal too, right?
The
So-
1 year
Yeah,
deal. Right.
yeah.
So you got 4 quarterbacks. Assuming they take a quarterback on Thursday night, you're going to have 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Is there room for a 5th guy? Are they going to let him compete? I mean, look, Bailey Zappi won them 2 games down the stretch last year, and I know a lot of people have kind of forgotten about him and thrown him to a side. I do think he's going to have to earn a roster spot. I don't think it's a given, but the only thing I'll say is when I look at this list here, I think you can get these guys. The majority of these guys you're going to get as UDFAs. If
Sure.
you like Keaton Slovis that much, you could probably sign him after the draft.
Mhm.
So if you go back to the full list, we're looking at guys like Jalen Simpson, Will Reichert, obviously,
Tanner
Josh
McLaughlin.
Cephas, Tanner McLaughlin, Justin. So I mean, there's some Frank Gore's kid too, out of Southern Miss. But yeah, and we could go another late round tackle. We can go another edge if we want, another corner. I mean,
I wouldn't mind going back to the offensive line. I know we talked about it earlier, whether it be an interior guy or an offensive tackle that has swing potential. I would not have a problem with taking another offensive lineman. I think you need to.
and I would lean out of those two. I'd probably lean tackle just for but we got Nathan Thomas, Jalen Sun. I mean, is there any? I think Jake, you mentioned Frank Crum earlier, but is there any like guys that stand out to you here?
I mean, I think that Frank Crum stands out just in that I think part of his evaluation, if I remember correctly, is that he might get pushed around a little bit as a tackle.
Yeah, he's long,
which-
he's lean, but he's not stout. He doesn't anchor
Which,
well.
yeah, so unfortunately, that wouldn't also make him a great interior offensive lineman unless they were going to
You know, he
go-
couldn't play inside. He'd be
No.
tackle
So I think that
exclusively.
kind of rules him out. Delmar Glaze, I feel like, is a name that I'm surprised he's still on the board. I saw him being projected as like a 5th round pick a couple of months ago. I think that he's someone who actually has done a pretty good job. He plays in the Big Ten where there's got big guys up front in front of him. You see there, he's only like 21 right now. So time to develop. I think that Maryland, they're kind of an unimpressive, unexciting program to be taking a guy out of. But I do think that against a tough slate of teams, he could be someone that if you're looking for a swing tackle or just a project to work on, Glaze could be a good guy.
Yeah, his teammates call him Donut.
Yeah, and we are talking about a guy that's played over 2,000 snaps in the last 3 years, and I think at this stage of the draft, that is valuable too. If you can get a guy with some
In
experience.
Glaze, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Glaze is a terrific value pick. And
Mhm.
when you look at the measurables, there's some swing potential there.
All right, I think our final pick is going to be Delmar Glaze.
We've got
All right.
Pop and Donut on the same team.
There we go. So our New England Football Journal. Let's see if they. I'm sure they're going to give us all Fs across the board once they grade our draft. All right, here we go. So can you guys see this? Is it pulling up? Yeah.
It
So we
is.
got an A+ for Drake May. Our trade's okay. We got a D+ for Kingsley though. Sarianides, I'm blaming you. And then Javon Baker, they gave us a B. Jared Wiley, Jerry and Jones, they really like your Kamara pick, Jake. Dylan Labe and Bub Means, though, they're not fans of at all.
They don't like
They-
Jordan Jefferson either.
Yeah, and it's funny because we have, I don't know how this, like, I respect PFF and I know how their player grades work, but this draft grade, I'm looking at D+, D-, FD, and then the overall grade's a B+. So I don't know how that works out.
How did they-
like, I don't
How
know.
did they come up with a B+?
Like maybe Drake May A+ a 3 just weighs so heavily that, we are able to get that.
So just so you know, this is going to be our final draft for the site. So in that trade with the Chargers, we got 37. We traded 34 for 37, 105, and 181. Correct.
Correct. Yep.
So 34 for 37,
And we walk away with
105, and 181.
right. And we walk away with a quarterback, and we walk away from this draft. We have 2 tackles, 2 receivers, a tight end, a corner, an edge, and a defensive interior guy. I mean, it's essentially, when you look at the Patriots roster, this is what you want to walk away with: multiple receivers, multiple tackles, but you'd like an edge, you'd like a corner, you'd like a running back. So that trade back helped us get those other guys, and
Well,
we're
it
only
gave us
moving back
right.
3
Those are
spots.
three picks. We only
Yeah.
we only dropped 3 spots, but
Yeah.
105 is a big pick. Getting that pick there is huge. Let's just recap it real quick. And do you think that this is a realistic draft? If this is what the Patriots did this weekend, would you guys be happy?
Overall, yeah. I mean, the only spot I would quibble is when I look at when we went like Bub Means and Jordan Jefferson. I wonder if the board could fall a little bit. Like, I think if those picks were swapped, I might feel like Bub Means is maybe we reached a little on, even though I like the player. And I think, Jake, you made a good point about his versatility. And John, you said it too. He could be a big slot sometimes. That's the only one that I'm like, maybe that was a little bit of a reach there. And I think Labe, I know it says D- here, but I think they just undervalue him because of the UNH factor. Like, I like that pick. I know they don't, but I like that pick. But on the whole, I mean, if this is their draft, I mean, you get the quarterback of the future, you get a potential left tackle, an X, a tight. I mean, again, chances are half this draft, the guys aren't going to pan out. But if half of them do, that's a pretty good chunk of your roster. That's pretty good.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think also we did a good job with some of these picks of picking guys that it seems like the Patriots are interested in, which I think is good for the listening and watching public of this. Because yeah, I think that Sua Mataia is like literally a player that they could go after even at 34. Javon Baker, I believe they've met with. I think he would be someone who also would be someone.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Jake. Not to cut you off. Let's look at it though. They've met with May.
Mhm.
They've met with Kingsley. They've met with Baker. They've met with Wiley. They've met with Jones. They've met with Kamara. They've met with Lobby. They have not met with Bub Means. They have not
But they
met
know
with,
him.
But they know him through Underwood. They have not met with Jordan Jefferson, as far as we know, and they have not met with Donut. So, but other than that, to your point, we didn't just pull these names out of our rear ends. I mean, we made it a point to target guys that they've actually met with and have an interest in.
Yeah, I mean, the first 7 guys we picked are guys they met with. And with the Patriots traditionally, and it's interesting too, because new regime now. So like under Belichick, like they never met with Garoppolo and they drafted him to be the QB of the future. But then there were other years that they would draft multiple guys they had met with. So I'm curious. This is something I think for us going forward to next year is something to watch. Do they draft mostly guys they met with? Do they draft plenty of guys they didn't meet? Is it a mix? Like, I think that's, and I have a feeling, and this is just a gut feeling, they're going to draft a lot of guys they met with. I think they want that comfort level, especially rookie head coach, rookie GM. They want that comfort level, that feel, young roster, especially on offense. I think we're going to see a lot of guys. Majority of the picks they make, I think, are going to be guys they met with.
Yeah, definitely. And also just given the fact that, like you're saying, it's a rookie GM or rookie head coach, I think that they want ownership to know that they're sold on these guys too. So when they say to Robert Kraft, hey, with 37, we're going with Kingsley. We talked to him. We think he's good. He played at BYU, but we're confident. Like, I do think that there is going to be that level of reassurance for someone like Kraft, because you do have to sort of be pious if you're Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo making these decisions to someone like Kraft and Jonathan Kraft. Like, you have to play the game a little bit with them. So I do think that not only is it good that they have met with a lot of these players, but I think it's also probably kind of likely that some of these guys do end up on the roster. I would say, because last year they met with Keon White, and I remember I mocked Keon White to the Patriots at 46. So we kind of know
what you think you are making fun of Keon White to the Patriots.
Am I making fun of Keon White? No,
well,
I'm not
you
making fun of Keon.
Them drafting Keon.
Oh, no. I would never offend the great Keon White because he could snap me in half with 2 fingers.
That's good. Yeah, that's
he is. I'll tell you, he has that.
I saw him at camp.
About him.
I'm really excited. This is a side note, but for when Keon White becomes fully comfortable in the NFL, he's gonna be awesome. Like, I am so excited.
He's like the Hulk.
He is gonna smoke dudes off the head. Like, and hopefully it's this year, and maybe it'll be next year. I'm hoping it's this year. That dude is gonna be a terror coming off the edge.
So when you look at this draft, what is the one pick you really don't like? Like, on a personal level, you look at this draft, what is the one pick where you're like, I just don't like that pick. I wish we went elsewhere.
Yeah, for me, it was that Bub Means, Jordan Jefferson area. We didn't have a lot of options on the board. And again, it's like the case you guys made for Bub Means, it's a good case. Like, I think he could make the team and be good, but it's just like, I like Delmar Glaze, I think, better than both of those players, just the way it worked out and for the position. So I'd say the only one I really am not a big fan of is Bub Means, but still, I think it's a guy that can make the team and contribute at least down on the depth chart.
Yeah, for me, and it was just right before I got back on. I'm not a huge fan of the Javon Baker. I don't know if Malachi Corley was there, but I'm sort of married to him the way that I was last year when I was pounding the table for Tank Dell. I think that you can line him up in a lot of different places. He's got great run after the catch ability. He's kind of like a smaller Debo Samuel, if you kind of want to call him that. So I would have preferred maybe him there, considering we only took a receiver in the top 100 once. I think if maybe with Wiley we had kind of gone after someone, I'd be more comfortable with it, just because the team is just so depleted, I think, offensively at receiver.
Yeah, this one's going to surprise you guys. I think for me, it's Dylan Lobby because I love Lobby as a player. I'm just wondering if he's going to be a good scheme fit. And again, we took him in the 6th round to pick 180. So it is what it is. I mean, you don't want to throw away picks, but if he doesn't pan out, he was a 6th rounder. But for me, I love the player. I'm just not sure the player is going to be a fit in this system. I think he would have been a better fit in Josh McDaniel's system. I think he would have been a better fit in Charlie Weiss's system when we think of previous Patriot systems. But in the West Coast offense, I think he's a fit in terms of the run game, outside zone. I think they can use him in motion to set up outside zone, inside zone. They could give it to him. But I question if he's an actual fit at running back in the backfield. That's my concern. Again, we took him in the 6th round, so if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. Plus, good PR local guy. He's a New York guy, but he played at UNH. But I just think, to me, I wonder if he's a system fit.
Yeah, and I think that's hopefully where his special teams ability would help him out a lot. Like
Right.
that's
Right. He's
even
a
if
tremendous punt returner.
exactly.
Tremendous returner, period.
And that's something like punt returner. Marcus Jones is coming back from an injury. I think kick returner. I think with Jalen Rager, you might be all set, but Labe could have a home at punt returner and maybe help return kicks as well. So it's something that even if the scheme fit takes a while to develop or isn't there, the special teams ability I think helps him out.
And I think the other thing too, John, is the one thing I love about Lobby is I legitimately believe you could just add about 60 numbers to his number and make him a receiver.
Yeah.
I think he can transition to a slot and be that type of player. I think when you look at his body type, he's 5'9", 205 pounds. He's thick. He's strong. I think he's a guy that could be that jack of all trades slot, use him in the run game, do different things with him. And as you mentioned, he could return punts. We've seen this with the Patriots before, but, and I'm not saying this because here we go, white guy playing in the slot, but the reality is he could, and I've thought this about him, and I've talked to people up there about the possibility of him being that type of player, and they all universally agree. The guy will do anything you ask him. There isn't a single guy that's in that program, and I've talked to a couple of people that played with him that said to me, he could play receiver. So, and his tape proves that. You don't need us to tell you that or anybody else, but I'm nitpicking when I say it, but I think if you use him in a variety of ways, it could be a really good value pick there. Overall, I think this is a pretty good draft. If they finished with something like this, I'd be pretty happy if I were a Patriots fan, because you get your potential franchise quarterback in May. You get a potential, I'm telling you right now, Sua Matea is he could end up being the best pure left tackle in this draft class. That's not hyperbole. I get what you're saying, Jake, about Javon Baker. I would have liked to possibly have gone Roman Wilson, Malachi Corley, Xavier Legette, one of those guys. But, I mean, again, I think once you get past, if you don't take those guys in the 2nd round, those guys, the Corleys, the Legettes, I don't think they're going to be there in the 3rd round. And the way this draft played out, Roman Wilson was gone too. So I kind of feel like Baker made the most sense there from a value standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think that back to your point about Sua Matea, I think that he really could be a true left tackle. He's Penny Sewell's cousin, I think, which if you're talking about, when we were talking about Frank Gore for just a second there, if you're talking about the bloodline, he checks all the boxes there. So, I think that he could be there. And I think also the nice thing is, and even though I think that Elliot Wolf was lying through his teeth when he said that he felt comfortable with Chuck Sikora playing left tackle, I do think that if they do, for the first 4 weeks, have to put him out there and Jacoby Brissett starts, and then you start putting Kingsley in, and then you start to, maybe incorporate a little bit of, Drake May, I do think that there's room for growth and development at the left tackle position rather than just like putting the kid out there in week 1 and saying like, oh, I don't even know who's on the schedule for the Patriots in week 1 or whatever. But it would, I think, be better for them to be able to let that guy sit, play a little bit, and then when things go bad with Chuck Okorafor, which I'm sure it's going to, you put him out there and you see how he's going to fare with Michael Weno on the other side.
Yeah, and Kamara's another pick. The more I look at it, they had him ranked a little high, I thought. I think the 5th round is probably his ceiling. I don't think he goes before that. I probably, if I could have waited on him, I probably would have. He's undersized. That's the thing. I mean, he is not a guy that, to me, in their system is going to start. I think he's a rotational sub-package piece. He's a guy who wins. He's a shorter edge rusher. He's a guy who wins with lean and speed. He's not a guy who's going to win with arm length and.
He's like an Elvis Doomerville kind of build.
Yes. I think that's a great comp for him. So, yeah. Are the Patriots going to use him, though? That's the thing, right? Like, the problem with Bill Belichick was through the years, they didn't necessarily buy into the idea of having the situational pass rusher. It was always, well, we got these guys. These guys are our pass rushers. We can play them at any given down at any given time. I still think this is a league where you want, if you can find that double-digit situational sack, situational pass rusher, I think they have a lot of value in this league. I think Kamara could end up being that guy for the Patriots.
Yeah, and I like the edge idea there. And again, I think like Keon White and Jennings, those are, I think, are your future at edge after Judon moves on and Uche moves on. So if Kamara's a rotational piece with them, I like that because I think that's like Jake, you mentioned it when we made the pick, I think, premium position. It's expensive to upgrade. If you have a younger, talented guy there, I like the thought to add that guy. And I think Kamara's a guy that if they use him correctly, I think they'll be happy with it. Now, he's not going to be an every down guy, like you said. But I think if they use him as a rotational piece, they'll end up being pretty happy with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Now, before we do go here, let's come back to reality for a sec. Ultimately, 2 nights away now from round 1. Ultimately, how do you see Thursday night playing out?
Yeah, I think they get Drake May at 3. I mean, I think the only way they trade down is if some team offers them 4 first-round picks or like an already established franchise-level player and multiple first-round picks on top. Like, it's going to take a crazy offer for them to move down. So I think they stay at 3. I think Daniels goes 2, and I think they get May at 3. I'm very iffy on them trading back into the first round at the end. I think like if a Brian Thomas falls or an Olu Fashanu falls for some inexplicable reason, maybe they will. Other than that, I think they pick at 3 and that's all they do on Thursday.
Yeah, I think they're going to stick and pick, as Daniel Jeremiah has been saying all year. I think it just makes the most sense for them. I get the trading back and acquiring more picks, and the sort of fantasy football player in me understands that that's probably the best way for you to go. But I also do think that we were saying it's a lot of PR. And there have been multiple reports. I think was it Diana Rossini who was saying that Jonathan Kraft is going to be very involved in the pick that's going to be made. They need a franchise quarterback. They need someone that they can have in the stupid little graphic on Fox when they're playing at 1 p.m. or whatever. They need that kind of guy. I think you could do that with Michael Penix if you traded back. You could do it with J.J. McCarthy, but I think the physical attributes and the potential upside, as well as just the fact that you have another franchise staple, a face of it, even though he might not play in the first year, just to be able to generate that kind of buzz for them, I think is more than enough of a reason for them to take him. And I think, maybe he is Justin Herbert, or maybe he's Sam Darnold. I don't know. But I do think that it's worth taking the risk. You got to swing at it.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the day, you need a franchise quarterback. You missed on Mac Jones. He didn't end up becoming the guy. You need to take a chance with one of these 2 quarterbacks that could be there, either Daniels or May. I agree with you, John. I think ultimately, and Adam Schefter's been saying this now for the last couple of weeks, Jane Daniels goes to Washington at 2. They've made it clear they're not interested in moving out. I think he'll be their guy there. I think, to me, Drake May makes the most sense for the Patriots. I think if it goes Williams, Daniels, May, I think it makes most sense for those franchises. When the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams as soon as they ended up with that pick, I think from a system fit, Daniels fits Cliff Kingsbury's system well in Washington. And I think with the Patriots, it's about where you are right now. And even if you think you'll be better next year, how much better is this football team next year? Let's be realistic. If Jacoby Brissett's your guy from start to finish, at best, you're probably a 6-11 football team. Maybe you steal another one, you go 7-10. This football team is a couple of years away. It's not going to be, if you're hoping for the CJ Stroud turnaround, it's probably a long shot. Could it happen? Of course it could happen. Anything is possible. You never know. I mean, they draft May, he comes into camp, beats out Brissett, has a great year, and they're a playoff team. Very possible. But I think when you look at the long-term forecast of this franchise, you want a guy that can develop with the plan. That's Drake May. I still say this, and I've said this from the beginning. I think he has the highest ceiling of any quarterback in this class. I think Caleb Williams is just about at his ceiling. I think Jane Daniels has a little bit more left. But to me, Drake May has the most upside. And then let's face it here, fellas. If you can get Justin Herbert or Jordan Love out of this deal, eventually, if he develops and becomes that type of player, you're going to be a playoff team and you could contend for Super Bowls again. I think that that's the name of the game here. I know there's a lot of people like our Kevin Stone, I'm team trade down and all this other bullshit. At the end of the day, you need a franchise quarterback. And trading down, this is not a knock on Michael Penix. I have a friend who coached him in high school. I talked to him about him. I mean, there's a ton to love about Michael Penix, okay? And I've heard people talk about taking a quarterback in the third round, maybe a Spencer Rattler. I talked to somebody about him that coached him in college that loved him. But I think at the end of the day, it's about potential. And when you're picking this high, been doing this 24 years, I've seen enough quarterbacks come through this draft in my lifetime. Your chances of landing that franchise guy, we know this, are better in the first round. Just go and take him. And if you know what, it doesn't work out in 3 years, it doesn't work out, you try again. But at the end of the day, if you pass on him, trade down, and then he becomes a Pro Bowler, we all know the Crafts don't like to have egg on their face. They would have a lot of egg on their face if they passed up on Drake May potentially and he ended up developing into a top 10 quarterback in this league. It would not be good. All right, gentlemen, great job. Awesome. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Let's do this again next year, God willing. But this was a lot of fun, and this is going to be our final draft. So on Thursday, our final mock draft is going to be this one. So there you have it. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of Patriots Pulse. For John Lyons and Jake Hamilton, I'm John Sarianides. Enjoy the draft this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. Enjoy it. It's been 6 months in the making. Let's see what the Patriots do. We will be back with you this weekend, breaking it all down. We'll have live streams. And, of course, we'll be back here next Tuesday night to wrap it all up and break it all down. Again, for John Lyons, Jake Hamilton, I'm John Sarianides. Till then, peace.